$5,000 more than what the city said it should be, adds 40 grand on it and gets the money. I want to scream at that one.
Well, when they're putting in the bids, aren't they still putting in the buffer, the contingency?
Are you?
I don't know.
I think so, because I was too.
Look, I don't need.
They're bidding low, knowing they can get a change order.
But you know who became a master of this?
Come to the realization.
Used to sit in my seat. He was the master.
Yeah.
He got every damn bid. I kept wondering, how does he get all these bids? He got every bid because he came in vastly lower than anybody. If you go back and look, those got crunched up by several $100,000. So the bid process is the way we're doing it.
Well, I'm not disagreeing with that.
I just haven't had enough time to think about how to solve the problem.
Well, everybody loves the idea of, oh, we're gonna get the lowest bid. And like you're saying,
And it doesn't end up being, it ends up the highest bid. Mike, is what I'm
I
saying.
know.
You have a pen over there.
Did you have a good
Not
time?
even at this, I did. Did you?
We had a wonderful time.
You know, we did.
Charlie's running a few minutes late, and Kamina won't be here tonight.
We did go over the Hula Grill, and it was the least of our favorites. The Lahaina Grill was fantastic down there. And so was Mama's Fish House.
Yeah, well, we went to Mama's Fish House and, we were at the Westin, which is right next door to the Hula Grill.
Yeah.
Close to Simon.
Did you leave Wednesday?
Charlie said to start with that.
We left here Thursday,
That's not
left there.
That's Kameen's, I
following
think.
Friday
Oh,
night.
she's not here.
I can't speak to it.
Okay, so should we get started? Like I had said, Charlie's gonna run late, so he told me to get started with that. I'm counting it. I'm with you, I'm counting it down.
You know, and I normally, I didn't look at the paper to see how many days were left in the year, but it's gotta be somewhere down there in
362, I think.
the, somewhere like 40-some or.
And I just thought that you just were so smart that you knew about that.
I thought you had the countdown calendar going.
Now you're doing it.
There's, you know, I read in the paper every morning, it says how many, it's under the horoscope, says there's so many days
Yeah,
left
to the end of the
in
year.
And I didn't, I'm still on Maui time, I mean, so if I fall asleep here, throw me some water.
Well, when did you come home?
Last night.
Oh, just last night.
jeez.
Oh, okay. Well, we got home Saturday night.
A $40 burger, huh?
2 restaurants where they had $40 burgers.
Was it worth
And
it?
I didn't eat one of them.
Oh.
I couldn't tell you. But there's a reason, because they come out with these menus and they're all fish dishes and they're all priced at a certain price point. And I said, do you have it? I just wanted the hamburger this one night. So yeah, sir, there's a hamburger down there. They don't call it, they call it something. But here's this hamburger and it's $40. I'm going, I would ruin my whole vacation if I ordered a $40 hamburger.
You better give me a back.
I'm sure it was good though. I'm sure it was good.
You got the cows.
That's crazy.
Well, you get out of the resort and you go somewhere else and the hamburger's $18.
Yeah, I had one of those $18 hamburgers.
I could handle that. I just couldn't possibly. It's just like having a tank up my truck. It's $104. I just can't handle that stuff.
Well, we were all sad that both of you were in Hawaii.
Yeah,
Must have been rough.
Yeah.
We thought of you though.
yeah.
You know.
Did you get any new Hawaiian shirts?
Actually, no.
You didn't bring a whole fleet of them home?
No, I have a whole fleet of them already.
Already.
The problem is, if I could probably wear a clean shirt every day for 2 years.
Oh my goodness.
But I will point out, none of the Hawaiians wear those shirts. They sell them in these gift shops in the Howleys, you know. So where's Judge Hubert? Usually comes in and buys 30 shirts.
Yeah,
He's
they
like,
have it,
Maybe they'll throw in a $40 hamburger.
I saw the truck. I saw the truck there at Elo Hattie's unloading, and it had my name on the boxes.
he said, man, they tilted the flour just a little bit. I better get one of those.
Bar and Grill RFP. Gardner.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. The Bar and Grill RFP process has now concluded, and we got 0 applications for the 5 that are out there and available to be dispensed by this group. Our recommendation would be that we, do nothing, since we have nothing to really approve or disapprove, and allow for sort of an open application process wherein folks can just submit an application when they have a proposal ready to be heard, and then we would bring that forward to you and let you consider it on a case-by-case basis, if that's okay with council.
Sounds good.
I do know a guy who wants one, but they don't have where they want to put it nailed down yet.
Gotcha.
Reduction of ice conditioner, Zamboni fleet.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the council, we submitted a letter to you, I think by virtue of this packet delivery this weekend, indicating that we have a Zamboni that is effectively not being used, and that would be the piece of equipment that came with the ice project at the event center. The DDA is in need of a Zamboni with regard to their new ice facility that they have downtown, which we had the opportunity to tour today. And I would recommend you go see if you haven't yet. We have visited with the Wold family, which, as you recall, participated in the contribution of funds that helped to in part purchase the this particular piece of equipment, and they are comfortable with the idea of allowing that piece of equipment to be used and operated and owned by the DDA, again, to be used at the ice facility there at the Davis Street Station. We have 2 at the ice arena that we use pretty regularly. One is fairly new, and I think is newer than the one that we've got at the event center, correct?
They're about the same vintage. Yeah.
Same vintage, okay. But in any case, those 2 pieces of equipment are serving us very, very well at the ice arena. And so, for all intents and purposes, that one that's being eyed by the DDA is truly a surplus piece of equipment for that type of use. And so if it pleases the council, we can certainly move in that direction. If council's not comfortable with that, we can rethink it and move accordingly.
Dallas.
Are they using it now? Is that the one I've watched them use?
They are using it right now on a lease basis, pending this discussion.
And those are how much? New, 85,000 or something?
Oh no, they're more like 120.
I know.
Yeah, they're pretty pricey pieces of equipment.
But the people who bought it don't care if they use it.
Correct. And I should, to be real clear, in my estimation, it was not only the Wolds family that helped purchase it, but 1% dollars were invested in that as well.
Who's gonna pay to maintain it and run it and all that stuff?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, the agreement would require that they would maintain that piece of equipment, and that would be the proposal that we would send forward, right, Mr. Cortez?
Yeah, it would be, well, it depends on what action. Currently, the way it is that they pay for the maintenance on it and stuff, and we would, if they decided to take it to city garage, we would bill them back for it, if you will, time and labor and materials and such. And of course, if we were to cut title to it as it were, as a long-term thing, then obviously we wouldn't have anything to do with it, unless they decided that maybe we had some expertise. Once again, we would bill them back for it.
Bob.
Yeah, my only question is I kind of looked into Zambonis, and that's a really big Zamboni for what we've got over here. And the same company makes one that goes on the back of a garden tractor. And while I didn't get pricing, it looks like it would be considerably less than a $125,000 machine. So what we might want to suggest to those guys, it just looks like overkill to me. They make this little thing that goes behind the $25,000 garden tractor. It would do the same thing. And an ice skating rink, or a hockey rink is about plus or minus 17,000 square feet. And this one over here is probably on the order of 10 to 11,000 square feet. And you've got some really sharp turns to make. And so I would just like us to consider, since we've got a new machine and may have a really good market value, at least discuss with them the idea of say, look guys, why don't you buy a garden tractor, you can move snow with it, you can sweep with it, and you can do your ice, and just put the ice machine on the back. It just hooks up to the back of the garden tractor.
Dallas.
He's right in a lot of ways. When we first started hockey, it was out in the sheep barn at the fairgrounds, and that's what we had, was a tractor that pulled the deal around, and sometimes I drove it, sometimes other coaches drove it, and it did the job. Although the difference is, with the way that Zamboni is, you can shave the ice. I don't know, it's gonna be how much action they have down there, but the people that skate down there aren't gonna be like hockey players and really gouge the ice.
Usage you're gonna get
and
out of
they
it.
need to-
Well, this
So
little
it probably
Zamboni
won't,
machine
it probably
has
won't be used that
shaver.
much. But if we have an older one, it might make sense to let them have that one and we take the newer one.
Yeah.
Cause it's big, it's like driving a semi on that ice rink as opposed to how you would do it. But I think the ice will look nicer and be smoother with a Zamboni of that size.
Sean.
What would be the amount that we lease it to them for?
Tim, do you want to address that if I may, Mr. Mayor?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
How much do we lease it to them for currently?
It's $100 per month.
Do you have any 4x4 Ford F?
It's a hell of a
That are 1/3 the cost, $33 a month?
So what's the council's pleasure then for this?
I would say go, but I think it
With that-
needs
with
to
that
have a
being the
discussion.
caveat, They need to be looking for
Yeah.
that, something smaller.
Before you
Okay.
give it to them.
Too bad we didn't buy him a tractor already.
Well, we can sell this machine for probably somewhere on the order of 78,000, buy them a new tractor and a Zamboni.
We will have that discussion and bring forward a proposal accordingly. You bet.
They'll have great ice down there with that. I mean,
Oh, it's a nice machine.
but it's what it does to the ice. It's a different texture and quality and all of that.
Do they have a place to store that kind of a machine down
Barely.
there?
Yeah, they built the place for a smaller machine, and they tested it, is what I understand, and it can just barely fit in there.
Firehouse #1 had one.
But it will fit, depending on who's driving, I suppose.
All right, change order, Trado Construction.
Indeed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If
I
I
wanna
could.
go out and stand outside. Call me when there's a vote.
No, we want you to.
How much is it?
Let me turn that time over to Mr. Beamer and go through that if you could, please.
Your Honor, Councilman Laird, if you'd like to step outside, that'd be fine.
I'm gonna go out and talk to Greg Hendricks. He was a master at this.
Your Honor, Council, Trado Construction just recently wrapped up the Beverly Street Improvements Project, which was a $630,000 contract on Beverly Street between 4th and 12th Street, included water main replacements and asphalt resurfacing. Now, when we put out a bid, we put out a bid schedule which is full of estimated bid quantities. We think there's gonna be 500 feet of curb and gutter that we need to replace, 1,000 feet of water main, 25,000 square yards of asphalt. And when we get going, occasionally we overrun some quantities and we underrun some quantities when the entire project is done. When we ran water main down these side streets, those side streets were in a lot worse shape than we were anticipating. So we had to replace additional curb and gutter, additional sidewalk, additional pavement. On some quantities we underran. We didn't replace as much concrete diamonds around water valves, but the net result is a change order increase of $33,000 and change on a $630,000 contract. So that is on the agenda tonight. It's currently on consent, but we thought we'd allow this opportunity at the pre-meeting to discuss any concerns you might have.
Questions? Dallas.
How many free tokens can we give the elderly and the disabled to ride on the bus for $33,000? If we turn this down, forget it.
Anybody else?
when we get the change order, this work's already been done, right?
It has been done, yes.
Okay.
It's hard for us to tell the contractor to stop until we come back to council for some of these items. When we get an open trench in the ground, I mean, occasionally we will find storm sewer pipe that we think we're tying into concrete or PVC, and there's still corrugated metal pipe in the ground. I can tell, in those situations, we tell the contractor, no, you've got to tie in to good pipe. I mean, we will not allow bad pipe to remain in the ground. So if we chase bad infrastructure, that's a little bit of a domino effect. We've got more pipe, and as a result, we've got more asphalt pavement on top. And occasionally, we got more curb and gutter and more valley pans. But we will not leave what we consider to be insufficient infrastructure in the ground.
Bob?
And I believe typically when we do overruns or underruns on quantities, they're bid by the yard or by the cubic foot or by the linear foot anyway, so,
We pay for what was actually installed.
yeah.
Correct.
Just for a thought you can all have for a later event.
How many days do you have left?
This is after my days are over. But it would be
I mean,
really.
you're the one who's brought it up, not me.
I know, and I agree, but just a thought. Mr. Manager, I think it would be helpful. Every time there's a change order asked for, you give a sheet that says, here's how much in change orders the council's approved this year. So they can get a sense of how much this is costing. Because I gotta believe there's another way of doing this. I don't have any problem with Mr. Beamer and how he comes to us with this. Where I have the problem is perhaps with an architect, or the way it's bid, or the way our contracts are drafted. But I don't think anybody here can tell me how much in change orders we've had this year, but it's a number. And I think if that's in our heads, you start thinking about what is this costing the taxpayer? Because I have one of them that sticks in my cron. It's the one up at the event center with the with chairs by the guy who underbid everybody and then came with a $40,000 change order and was so far above everybody else, he would have bid that, he'd have never got that bid. So that bothers me for some reason. And I just don't think it ought to be kept going on, but hey, it's a couple more days for me, so. But
Go ahead.
My reaction is, I can't comment on the chairs, but with this one, it's not costing us one more penny to do this. Because if the engineering estimate had known all the information that they now know, the bid would have, the specs would have gone out, including all of this extra material, and that's how much it would have been bid for. So it's not costing us one more penny. That's why we have the contingency. And so it's costing us what it would have cost us because that's the work that needed to be done. We just didn't know that at the time.
go talk to the contractor. You might change your mind. No, I'm serious, Charlie.
I'm saying in this particular case.
Well, but I've talked to a couple of the contractors and they tell me a few things. So if you really want to get into the depth of it, to understand maybe how you can do something, go talk to them. It's okay.
Anything else? Okay. You gonna talk about an amendment?
Yeah, if I could. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
In response to a question, I think it was last time we met, we handed out this spreadsheet here.
Yeah, thank you.
It should kind of map out the amount of employees and so forth. One of the numbers here that I'd like to draw your attention to is right in the middle of the page nearly, where it says 5 positions with regard to the police department. I want to be real clear about what that is so that you don't think we misled you last time we talked or whatever.
Where is it?
It's kind of toward the top middle portion of the additional positions column.
Oh, yeah.
It says
Okay.
5 related to the police department. We talked about 3 positions.
In their bylaws, and the bylaws being changed. I mean, they just very kind of quickly threw something together, because they decided to leave Metro. They were, Casper Metro no longer for, because Metro couldn't provide the numbers, I think they wanted to see the finances. So I'd be interested in talking to Nels anytime, you know, how that's working for them, how much they have to spend. You know, I heard some wild things, I mean, this is just being proposed, and like, oh, Nels is phone him a call and ask him how it's working. But, yeah, I understand, so very much.
We gotta, more needs to be done for sure, and what, long term. But what, like you said, other than getting veterinarians on board to spay or neuter them, and then find them a home, and then that way if they're out, and if we can limit the reproducing, that limits the cats.
But I don't think that there's been any veterinarians who are going to step forward and would, there's a,
fundraising separate from the DDA, because one of their challenges is when they try to fundraise for the station, people say, well, the DDA is the city, why is the city asking me for money? And it's just a kind of confusion that goes on that sort of limits them. So, I think it makes sense to create a separate entity that runs the station. But they do need to get started with that because they're already starting to schedule for the summer. So they kind of want to see if there's any concerns about doing that, or if it's okay for them to just move forward.
I thought that was the original intent. That's one of the reasons I voted yes to give money to the project, because they told me that they weren't gonna be running it, that they were gonna give it off. I don't know, they changed their minds.
They had an operational committee that was sort of almost like a subcommittee of the DDA. That's how
Who
they
would the
did
people
it.
be that would be running it, Charlie?
Well, they would form their own board, just like the NIC or any other city, any other operation that runs a city-owned facility.
Do we appoint them?
We appoint the NIC board, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so yeah.
We appoint the board.
yeah.
So would they
Who
come
would
to a,
spearhead it?
would they come to a proposal with a, with a proposal to us about it, do you know, Charlie?
I don't know, what do you need from
What
them?
do we need, I guess, Kurt, that would be my question.
Mr. Mayor and Councilman, the concern that I would have is with regard to the agreement that we currently have with the DDA and potentially needing to amend that agreement in the event that an additional entity would be created.
Yeah, they understood that obviously they would have to give 30 days notice to the city to cancel that agreement, and then this new entity would form a new agreement with similar terms, I assume.
I would assume so.
And we'd have
That's
to
all
decide
understood.
whether we pay for the cost of forming the 501c3, because it's not free.
We have a city attorney, doesn't
I think they would
He
take care
works for
of that,
money,
Bob.
too.
Yeah, I think that did come up, and there's an assumption, I think, that they would, do you remember that, Liz?
You're correct, Counselor.
They would take care of those fees.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
Do you need me to initial this? Are you leaving?
No, I'm coming.
I look forward to it. Good evening. Sorry we're running a little late. We were just finishing up a conversation in back. I now call the November 20th, 2018 regular council meeting to order. Would council members please denote your presence by depressing your yes switch? Chair would entertain a motion to, by minute action, excuse the absence of Councilwoman Humphrey.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilman Morgan, seconded by Councilman Walsh. Sorry. Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passes.
Council meetings are also televised. It can be viewed on cable channel 192. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the minutes of the November 6th, 2018 regular council meeting as published in the Casper Star Tribune on November 14th, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Johnson, seconded by Councilman Hopkins. Amendments? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passes.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the minutes of the November 6, 2018 executive session.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Hopkins, seconded by Councilman Walsh. Any amendments? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passes.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the minutes of the November 13th, 2018 special council meeting as published in the Casper Star Tribune on November 19th, 2018.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilman Walsh, seconded by Vice Mayor Powell. Any amendments? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passes.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the November 20, 2018 bills and claims as audited by City Manager Napier.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Morgan, seconded by Councilman Johnson. Any abstentions? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passes.
Now is the time that we invite anyone in the audience who wishes to come and speak with the council to come forward. As stated on the first page, we just ask that you make sure that you please state your name and your address. Please direct all your questions towards me. No personal attacks on the staff or the council will be tolerated. We will not respond to personnel matters. Those will be referred to our city manager. And questions posed by speakers may or may not be responded to by the council. And please remember just to keep it to 5 minutes and there will be no extensions. So first come, first serve. Mr. Steens.
Names 1533 South Washington. I had highlighted a couple items to bring up tonight, just for the heck of it. But it was interesting Zamboni discussion in your prior meeting. $120,000 thing, and 2 months ago we couldn't come up with $25,000 for the snow removal. I noticed the snow removal was done. So anyway, that's just a sideline on my part. My one question was consent item 3, three air conditioners for control panels. I don't know how you come up with $28,000 for an air conditioning. Most control panels are small in my experience, so I would be interested in knowing how it costs $9,000 to air condition a control panel. I did have the change order down. We'll pass that one up. And then concerning the amount of money you're spending for some of your vehicles for the different wastewater or the dump out there, this time it come up to $100,000. before trade-in allowance. That caught my eye. Why do we list a number if we don't have a trade-in allowance? So there's two items there that have trade-in allowance that add up to $100,000. Solid waste division, that seems to be getting a lot of attention, a lot of big money. Same thing, $475,000. This meeting, Dallas was concerned about all the change orders over the year. There has been a whole bunch of them, and it seems like the wastewater or solid waste has got an inordinately amount of money this year from the budget. And it always amazes me. We've got a budget, and now tonight we have an amended budget. I'm wondering if that's the end of the amended budgets, and if all of this money that's on the sheet has already been accounted for in the budget. I think that covers my headaches.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Steensland. Good evening.
I am Amber O'Donnell. I reside at 3436 Whispering Springs here in Casper. When my daughter was little, she learned about cowboy ethics at the Boys and Girls Club. She found this new knowledge and vocabulary so inspiring, she made this rock for me. Here in her scribbled handwriting, it says, "Be the change, Mommy," with integrity scrawled on the back. The funny thing about this rock is it always seems to resurface when I am facing some type of change. From recovering after surgeries to having to stand against the mistreatment of my daughter, this rock means more to me now than ever. As Caitlin's mother, I have had to bear witness to adults in positions of authority minimize the bullying and assault inflicted against my child. She went from being told she was brave by the responding officer at the ER to being called the aggressor by the school resource officer, a horrible label others have been quick to adopt. For standing up for herself, she was rewarded with being suspended right along with the bullies and now being asked to utilize a different bus route that is farther away from her home because it would be inconvenient for the bullies to find different transportation. Yet somehow it's acceptable to continue to punish and inconvenience the bullying and assault victim. I've witnessed mistakes made that impacted the decision-making process with no acknowledgments or apologies. I've been impacted financially in being home to care for my daughter, left scrambling to make rent because individuals decided to cut funding to community action, and thus community action was unable to help with the full amount needed to keep the roof over our heads. But the worst part in all this has been having to watch some of these same adults try to discredit my daughter and outright lie in an attempt to absolve themselves of wrongdoing and responsibility. If as a grown-up, this horrific mess has the ability to frustrate anger and impart insane amounts of stress to where I sometimes forget to eat during the day or have embarrassingly broken down crying in a public parking lot, can you imagine what this must do to a child on the inside? Well, you don't have to imagine, because I can tell you. Several weeks ago, Caitlin attempted suicide. I don't know how much more serious this needs to get before we as a community recognize and address this very important issue plaguing our community and schools. It's time to stop enabling the bullies and time to start supporting the victims. No child and no parent in our community deserves to be treated this way. I have composed a petition currently signed by 111 people and growing of the changes I would like to see made in combating this. Stop deeming bullying as mutual combat when a victim stands up for themselves. Confronting a bully is not giving permission to be assaulted. Better policies can and should be written with swift enactment. Prosecute juveniles for assault. A child should not have to be killed by their peers before action is taken. Stop referring to victims who stand up for themselves as aggressors. They are brave to confront their antagonists and deserve to be treated with compassion, not indifference. Implement better training of staff with increased communications to the parents. A parent of an assault victim should not have to wait over a week to be contacted. Retain transparency with parents. If a child is the victim of an assault or bullying incident or accused of misconduct resulting in punishment, the parent should be allowed to view the tape being cited as evidence. Mistakes can and have been made by police and school district officials in their use of such. This is why it's so crucial for parents to have access to this information to make sure their child's civil rights are not being abused. Stop giving victims the same punishment as the bully. There should not be an indifference to peer harassment. Remove individuals engaging in bullying and assault of other students from the bus. Children's safety should be a priority. Actively pursue available grants and community resources to combat bullying, which often leads to suicide of the victim. Many of these resources are free and not being utilized. This is unacceptable. Natrona County Suicide Prevention Task Force should not have to fight schools to be allowed to present crucial life-saving skills. In closing, Caitlin asked for my help in making a gift for you. It's a gift of encouragement that comes with a challenge. We are challenging you, City Council members, to go forth with integrity and be the change. Lives are depending on it. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. We appreciate you sharing your story. Perhaps we do know, I know Councilman Laird had pushed for us to want to put a resolution out for anti-bullying. I spent quite a bit of my time working in anti-bullying as a youth worker for a long time. So I certainly understand the importance of that. I know this council understands the importance of it. And while we don't know the specifics of the case, which we can't comment on, obviously, but what I can say is that we do, as a council, find, and I think as a community, find bullying to be abhorrent, to be awful, and should be contrary to anything that we do. And so I'm hoping that we continue to fight that as a community, and that we do take that that voice to say we need to stand as a community with integrity. So we thank you for coming and sharing that.
You're welcome. I certainly think that the community needs to be proactive instead of reactive. It seems a lot of these changes have to come after the fact, after somebody is harmed.
Anybody else? Yeah.
You know, I met your daughter. She's a lovely girl, and she's 12, I think, isn't she?
Correct.
Boy, does she have a fantastic vocabulary. Very smart young lady, and it's tragic what happened to her. It's tragic that we don't have the laws in place, which is why I proposed the bullying resolution, which I hope leads to a bullying ordinance. Because when I reviewed the state statute on bullying, it's more or less a resolution in and of itself, and it has no teeth in it. So I've only got a few days left on the council, but I know that a few of them are really serious about doing something with bullying, and I hope they take the big step. I hope your daughter heals from this, because this shouldn't have happened to her. And I do know this, the school board hired a very good attorney who's very fair, Craig Silva, who's going to look into this, and hopefully he can come up with some solutions that will help everybody, school board and everybody, because the school board doesn't want these things to happen either. But they're all burdened by certain archaic laws that the legislature really needs to take a look at. So tell your daughter I said hello, will you? Thank you.
Councilman Laird, which is why we need to continue to be the change.
Councilman Hubert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ma'am, the question that I would have is realizing that the city council, we don't run the schools. You know, what the schools do, that's the school district and that. But, setting that issue aside, what suggestions do you have that you would like to see the city do?
I think I went through them. I mean, because my understanding is that as council members, that you act as a legislative branch of city government as well as its policy-making body. Is that correct?
Correct.
So then obviously there need to be changes made in policy.
Well, but what I'm asking, if you have any thoughts. Is any specific changes, any specific suggestions that you have?
Well, just as I started out there, to stop deeming bullying as mutual combat when a victim stands up for themselves. I think that's a big one there. As I stated, confronting a bully is not giving permission to be assaulted. That better policies can and should be written with swift enactment.
Well, I with the greatest of respect, ma'am, I think that that's a policy that the school district, not the city, has. I don't know that the city really has anything in place that codifies that kind of a policy.
Well, I guess I would disagree with respect, because I look at it as the school resource officer, is he not part of the city of Casper? Correct? So that would mean that you would have ties, that you guys in a sense are partners. And also that it's not just a school thing, it's a community issue that needs to be addressed by the community.
That's a good point.
Well, and what I'll say too is that, and I know a lot of the school district, I've worked pretty closely with the school district officials, and I've worked in a lot of the schools, and I know their hearts are very, very good people. And I've worked very closely with a lot of these women and men, and they're good people that don't want to see bad things happen to kids. They're in that position, they're in those jobs because they care deeply for young people and wanting to make a difference in those lives. And these are the things that we face in trying to stop, bullying, which can be there's so many moving parts in bullying that gets it's very difficult. And I know our resource officers, I can speak highly for our resource officers to try to continue to work with developing relationships with with the students. I have 4 kids in the school district, and I know and understand the daily trials that they go through going to school and having to face that. My hope is, and I don't want to, one of the things I don't like doing is placating people that come up to speak. Our hope is that I do agree with you that the city and the school districts should continue to communicate and work together, since we do have our school resource officers, but that we can create a community that is safe for every student, for every child, that can go to school feeling safe to go there and feeling part of a family. And so I do agree that we need to continue to do that, and I think that's our objective and our hope, and I do believe that that's the school district's hope as well.
Correct. We would like to see it enacted, not just to have words, but to have actions follow through.
Agreed.
May I make one more comment? What we do is we pass ordinances, which is in essence a legislative type matter. So we could pass an ordinance that would make bullying a crime. And the school resource officers are Casper police officers. And so the council and the police department do set policies for how our employees are to react to certain sort of incidences. So I think that and then the school board has to make their own rules. There is a state statute where the legislature empowered the school board to deal with bullying, and I know they're doing that. In fact, the resolution we passed, there was a clause that Mr. Walsh suggested that we work with the school board. So everybody is working together. Nobody wants bullying, but just so in your thinking, what we can do beyond the resolution is to pass an ordinance that the council would publish notice of and then vote on 3 different times, just like any other law we pass. It's a law that prohibits bullying in the city. We're not excluded from making laws that would affect a school or would affect your private home or would affect any other place within the city limits. So, but it's easier said than done, but it's way overdue. Agreed. And so I'm hoping, I know that the chief of police can set policies at the police department, and the council is authorized by statute to regulate certain things within the police department itself. And then there's the ordinance. So just so when you're discussing it, you'll now know hopefully the different mechanisms that can be put in place, including visiting with your state legislators, seeing if the state will adopt some sort of law that's uniform across the entire state of Wyoming.
Yes. I've also reached out to them as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming tonight. We appreciate it.
Would you guys like the petition?
If anybody, if the council would like to sign it, if there's anybody up here that would like to, yeah, you can pass it around. Oh, are you saying, oh, yes, leave it with our council. I'm sorry, with the manager. My apologies. I misunderstood. Thank you so much, Ms. O'Donnell. Good evening.
My name is Donya O'Donnell. I live at 626 Morgan Avenue in Mills, Wyoming. I am also Caitlin's grandmother. I am the grandmother of 10 grandchildren. All of them attend school here in Natrona County from elementary to high school. What I want to say is this. I'm here to discuss what is plaguing our school system. The misguidedness with students and faculty. I have witnessed this injustice, okay, firsthand with 3 of my grandchildren already. My grandson David, missing from school, walked out of supposedly locked doors of the school, 7 years old, in the middle of a snowstorm. Okay, it took over an hour for the school to realize he was missing. They found him a half a mile away from the school, okay, on Poison Spider in Yellowstone, which we all know is a very busy intersection, okay. The second one is my grandson Nicholas, who the year before in elementary school was bullied repeatedly by a bully. He also had his elbow broke by this bully. Now he goes on to junior high school. This bully follows him into junior high, same school, starts bullying him again. He goes to his first dance in junior high, all happy and excited. Well, the bully shows up and ruins everything, okay? And my other daughter, brings this to the attention of the school again. And they say they will deal with it, but it doesn't seem like anybody's dealing with it. Now we get to my third grandchild, which is Amber's daughter, who was assaulted and bullied on the bus, okay? And assaulted once she got off the bus and ended up in the ER here, okay? With a concussion, welts on her head, bruises and scratches, okay? Now my daughter brings it to the attention of the school, all right? First she asks to see the tape, which is on the school bus. First she's denied that. Then she goes back in and asks them again to see it. Now she gets to view it, okay? And she's sitting there, and the administrators are making their comments to my daughter. Well, along the road, they misidentified my granddaughter on that tape, okay? That wasn't good. You understand what I'm saying here? All right. I'm just as upset with my daughter for being treated not well here during this whole situation with the school system and what's going on here. Okay, we feel it should be our right as parents to at least have the opportunity to let the public know and to examine this tape on the bus instead of the administrators making their comments and calling my granddaughter an aggressor. My granddaughter's not an aggressor. She's a 12-year-old child, innocent. Do you understand? Okay, that needs to be corrected. And speaking of that, that was said by, what you call the school resource officer said this to my daughter. That's not a correct term to use for a 12-year-old child at all. And then it gets put in the paper, all right? That doesn't help my family in any shape or form. You know, I understand about waiting for administrators to do their jobs and to, you know, to understand what just occurred on the bus and the assault on my grandchild. But a lot of this is being very misunderstood right now. And then you force my daughter, who is on her income, supporting 2 children, okay, to try to come in and fight the government to get some justice concerning the bullies assaulting her children, and then we're blocked there too. You know, this is, to me, is just so unfair. I can't even believe this is going on right now. All my family wants is some corrections within the school system. And, you know, you're talking about what city council could do. Well, one thing is, you know, Years ago, you used to send dare officers to school about drugs and things like that, correct? Well, why can't you send an officer in there concerning about bullying to teach our children that this is not acceptable? I think that'd be one thing the city could do, and I think it'd be a good thing, okay? And I think it should start from elementary school and continue on to high school.
You have 30 seconds.
Okay. Well, I just thank you for listening to us tonight, okay? And I hope we gave you something to think about.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you. You're a good grandmother.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
I
Odell.
love my grandchildren. They're very important to me because this is our future generation. I don't raise my grandkids to misbehave or be mean or hurt people. You know, I raise them to stand up for people and do what's right and get a good education in life. And I hope they become something very important in the end, you know. But that's grandmother's love.
Right.
Like I said, I have 10 of them. I have 7 grandsons and 2 granddaughters. So, you know, my plate's full, but I love them all, and they're very good children. My granddaughter, Caitlin, is just a joy and a love. She's my pride and joy. And I hope we can come to some kind of conclusion on this in the end concerning all this, especially for my daughter, because, you know, this has put a really bad hardship on her. Okay, and she's trying to do the best she can with the knowledge she has, and, you know, she spoke very well to you tonight. I'm very proud of what she had to say, and I back her 100% on everything. So I'm hoping you'll back her too in the end, okay?
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Anybody else? Good evening.
Carla Edwards, 5510 South Oak. How's that? Is that okay? Mr. Mayor and council members, I am here to issue my opinion on the newly proposed amendments to the Casper Animal Control Acts. I understand that it is to be discussed during the next work session on Tuesday. I would like to thank the Mayor and City Council for the efforts it has made to solicit public opinion on the new proposals of additions to the animal control bylaws. My husband and I do not own pets, but have great concern for fair and equitable laws set forth to Casper area residents as they relate to animal welfare and control. I'd also like to give a shout out to Tori Walsh, who took over as the Metro Animal Shelter Director in 2013. She has implemented numerous changes for the better with respect to adoption programs. She and I have met on several occasions to discuss any potential improvements and patch up any perceived cracks in the system. I am an administrator of the Facebook group Casper Pets Lost and Found. I took over as primary administrator in January 2015 when there were about 300 members. Today, we number 11,200 people, most of whom are local residents. We work to locate urgent missing pets, get found pets back to their owners, liaise and advocate for Metro Animal Services and Metro officers, and dispense information pertaining to local bylaws as it relates to animal control and ownership. We do this in a calm and sensible manner, hopefully, with a strict no drama rule and close monitoring of posts by our admin and moderator staff, always mindful of current laws as set forth by the city and state. Because of our extraordinary success, our board model has been copied and utilized by other citizen groups in cities across the country. We have an average of 6 to 12 pets a day appear on our board as lost, found, or as seen at large. We encourage those who have found pets to follow the law to ensure proper reports are made. We host a list of current stray holes at the Metro Shelter, which gets distributed across the entire social media platform so it can be viewed in all major Casper Facebook groups. And by utilizing new technology, reports are then picked up by Google so they can be seen by people outside of Facebook. We will go to great lengths to get pets home, even taking out ads on behalf of pet owners with the Casper Star Tribune, posting to Craigslist.com and on Nextdoor.com. Tori Walsh credits our group for making an impactful difference in the numbers pertaining to owner reclaims and euthanasia rates, and she has expressed thanks for the public education we offer. When I took over as group administrator, I started a program to promote responsible pet ownership by offering a monthly drawing of a free microchip. After a few months of being funded by myself and a few of our members, Mrs. Walsh then offered to provide our winner a complimentary pre-registered microchip at Metro's expense. So we do have common goals and interests. Now to the present. Officer Tiffany Hyde, who is a Metro officer, has been working on rewriting our local animal control laws for over 2 years. She is a senior Metro officer who has to work under weak and outdated Casper municipal laws on a daily basis. Her proposed changes, which I call the Hyde version, have been carefully crafted in order to bring about changes that are fair and equitable for pets and their owners. She has rewritten the entire chapter on animal control laws through careful research. When her drafted changes were nearing completion, the city attorney received proposed amendments to existing laws as set forth by Councilman Walsh. This Walsh-Henley version did have Officer Hyde in a bit of a mad scramble. Her draft was still in the fine-tuning stages, but she had to go with it in response to new proposals. At its most simple level, the Hyde proposal was in danger of being completely steamrolled by piecemeal legislation. In emails to council members, I tried to make sure you all had the Officer Hyde version to review in order to weigh it against the Walsh-Henley version. I next set out to seek opinions of the 11,200 members of our boards. The respondents were asked to read both versions and provide feedback as to their preferences.
You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. During this period, Officer Hyde also received some helpful comments from the public and made minor changes of her own revisions. The results of polling were overwhelming, with 98% in favor of the Hyde version. The paragraphs on reckless owners in the Walsh-Henley version, along with punitive fines, were major pain points and are not in keeping with the public interest. I could just basically skip the rest of this. You can probably read it in your reviews. I also wish to point out that the city's request on the public opinion did not include Officer Hyde version or any portion thereof, and it is to this that I address my request to send the whole issue back to the drawing board in order to reconsider the adoption of the Hyde proposal. Just as our group is a model for public education and citizen cooperation with a government agency, I would urge council to move in the direction of the 21st century animal control laws and be the forward-thinking model community that I know that we can be. Sensible rebuilding of the ordinance is in order and not more amendments and laws. The Hyde version is the model deserving of serious consideration. Respectfully, Carla Edwards.
Thank you. I think Councilman Walsh would like to say something.
Thank you, Mrs. Edwards. And I know you truly are a significant factor in the community in returning lost animals. So
thank you.
I appreciate you for the work you do on that. As we've gone through the public input process, just last night, I was going back and forth with the city attorney making different changes. So you'll see that I believe that our best final changes will be coming out tomorrow afternoon in our work session packet. There's been considerable changes compared to what was seen on that initially. So public comment period wasn't for naught or just fluff. So there'll probably be some things in there that you don't completely agree with, but take a look at this next one. And
that's why I wanted to take the opportunity to talk tonight. We generally are not in town in the wintertime. So I wouldn't have, I probably don't have a lot of opportunity to address this again in the future.
Well, if you can get on the internet, you can shoot me an email. So
I'm on vacation. Who wants to internet?
I agree.
But no, I really think that Tiffany has done a lot of work, serious consideration. She's given great weight to all of the issues, and within the ordinances, she's drawn on some of the best ordinances in the country to craft this new proposal. A lot of them actually came from Laramie, so they're relative to our weather extremes with regards to shelter of animals outside, that kind of thing. And she's also cut out a lot of the fat, a lot of the weight, things like tattooing of animals. I mean, who does that anymore?
I think you'll see a lot of the similar stuff in the.
Yeah, so I'm really hopeful that the council will maybe take into consideration her proposals, make sure that they're fully read. I know that most of you have her version, and give it great weight, because our group at 98% is in favor of her proposal for what the ordinances should read. All right.
I have a question. What would you say was the biggest factor, at least from your reading of both proposals, that you believe should be, why Tiffany's, whatever her proposal was, as opposed to the one drafted by, as you're calling it, the Walsh Henley?
Walsh Henley.
I just want to know what bothers you the most.
Yeah, the biggest pain point was the punitive and onerous punishments for things for up to like a 5-year restriction from owning any animals. I also kind of questioned the data that was input. I think I recall that there was 700 bites, which started this entire change proposal. That didn't say to me how many of those bites were in home by a family pet on a family member, and does that necessarily correlate to vicious dogs at large, and being a danger to the public? I don't know. I didn't have that sense that those numbers were translated properly. I would like to see more information on those bite numbers personally, but I doubt that it would affect the outcome of any of this.
Do you think service dogs are a problem?
There is a public perception that all dogs, including emotional support dogs, are called service dogs. And I believe the state has made a distinction on that.
Federal government has.
Sorry?
The federal government has, and then the state basically
Okay, all
adopted
right.
that.
Yeah, sorry. I know that somebody else had. Emotional support dogs should not be given the same consideration as an actual trained service dog.
Unless you have an emotional support dog, then you want that.
We don't have any pets, so I have no skin in this game. When we go on holiday, it bothers me to stay in a place in a hotel room that somebody has been in there with a dog, and what if I were allergic to fleas and the dog left fleas behind and they just had to have it because it was an emotional support dog? That's just my personal opinion.
So what do you think the penalty should be?
For
what you just referred to?
For the emotional support versus?
No, for the ones you addressed to begin with, the fine.
Vicious animals?
Yeah.
And reckless owners?
And the 5 years and that kind
The hardest point for me was that reckless owners. The Hyde version has something different other than a reckless owner, and I can't remember what she called it offhand. But it was very well thought out and has the full support of our group. She doesn't have that kind of punitive action against a dog owner. And I don't think anyone should be restricted from owning an animal for 5 years.
I don't either.
It's.
I actually don't think it would be lawful for us to do it because our court only has jurisdiction for 6 months over any kind of a crime.
This was one of my points. I just basically skipped over that for time, but yeah, that was one of our points.
Mr. Hanley's given me the look. It just happens to be, he's a very fine attorney. I just think it's too punitive, and I don't think it's in line with jurisdiction, but he's done more research on it than I have.
Right.
So.
Right. So if anybody wants to make sure that they have a hot copy of Tiffany's, what she's done to rewrite it. I acted basically as her sounding board, devil's advocate, if you will, just to make sure that, what she was writing down was in keeping with what I think the public wanted and people in our group wanted to see.
Ms. Edwards, Councilman Huber had something to say.
Well, ma'am, first, it's obvious that you and the people that you work with have given a great deal of very sincere thought to this and everything, and I really commend you for that. One of the things that I'm concerned about is that, we got the city of Casper, we got Barnum Mills, Evansville, we've got Natrona County, and we've got some state statutes involved here. And one of the things that you're all going to hear me talking about is let's try to get together and have, sort of a uniform countywide, to the extent that we can, pet ordinance on this. I know one of the towns just simply adopts the Casper ordinance. I think that's Evansville. That
I believe you're correct.
simply adopted ours. So I want to be and I've gotten the copies of all those, and I want to be kind of talking to those guys and working with all of them and how we can kind of bring things together. And so I would suggest and ask that you bounce that out to your group and see, you know, so that we're not everybody going in different directions. Now, obviously, there might be some things that, you know, one town wants to have one way and another town wants to have another way. And so I would kind of ask that you put that out to your group to get their thoughts on that. I can't resist responding, though, ma'am, when you say that what you said about restricting reckless pet owners that have vicious animals. I absolutely think that there is such a thing as irresponsible people that should be denied ever owning a pet.
So noted.
Because of the way that they treat them and the way that they subject everybody else to that, to, you know, to having vicious animals and things. And I think that what we have to do is we have to figure out some way to balance that and to try to get that on a positive note rather than just a negative note. But let's face it, there are some people that just don't learn. And, you know, okay, they got this vicious dog and they get rid of that one, they're going to go right out and get another one. And I think that's something that we need to recognize. And unfortunately, at some point, the courts have to step in and deal with.
To your point with respect to the various communities around Casper, we originally, before Mills decided to leave the umbrella of Casper Metro, we had been working on these changes for the law, for the local animal control laws. And I understand that Mills is working on another revision of their initial program, and their program is quite different than what we were looking at for Casper. For example, Mills has enacted a trap, neuter, and release program for when a feral cat has been brought in. It'll be trapped, neutered, the ear is clipped, and then it'll be released, whereas here in Casper, the current directive is euthanasia on a feral cat. I don't know which is best. I haven't talked to Mayor Coleman with regards to, and even if he would disclose to me, I don't know. But what their finances are with respect to that, I mean, is this something that Casper should look at? What's the cost? What's the anticipation? I mean, I don't have all the answers. I just have a lot of concern for the pets and the way that the laws here are structured. I really think that Casper could be the model for exemplary pet law, just as my group is.
Well, we all hope.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ezra. Appreciate it. Okay. Please read the consent agenda titles.
Establishing December 4th, 2018 as the public hearing date for consideration of the following two items: new distillery satellite tasting room ordinance of the Casper Municipal Code and transfer of location of retail liquor license number 5, Travis Taylor, doing business as Cocktails, located at 134th North Center, to Travis Taylor, doing business at Cocktails, located at 138 South Kimball, and establishing January 8th, 2019 as the public hearing date for consideration of the appeal of Planning and Zoning Commission's decision to deny conditional use permit for an off-premises sign billboard in a C2 General Business Zoning District on Lot 4, Block 159, Casper Edition, located at 1329 South Poplar Street, for applicants David DeWald and Lamar Advertising.
Chair to entertain a motion to, by minute action, establish the public hearing dates just read.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Morgan, seconded by Councilman Walsh. Any abstentions or nay votes?
I have to abstain from the Travis Taylor request, and I.
Any other abstentions? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
With the abstention of Councilmember Laird noted, motion passes.
I now declare the public hearing open for the consideration of the vacation portions of various streets and alleys. Mr. City Attorney, do you have any exhibits?
Yes, Mayor. We have two exhibits. Exhibit number 1, correspondence from Liz Becker to J. Carter Napier, dated November 9, 2018. Exhibit number 2, affidavit of publication, is published in the Casper Star Tribune, dated November 7, 2018.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager, do you have a report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. As you all probably recall, with regard to the development of the Natrona County High School property, there were a number of easements and alleys and streets that were consumed, if you will, in the design of that campus. The action that we're proposing this evening would clean up those vacations and readdress the alleys and so forth, excuse me, the easements and so forth that have been discussed and planned for and talked about. I should also note that much work has been done to communicate with the neighbors with regard to these particular changes as the statute would suggest. And approval of this would, like I said, accommodate the changes that this takes in.
Thank you. Council will now listen to public comment. Public hearing comments are limited to 5 minutes, and then, of course, no duplication of speakers will be allowed. At this time, I would ask those individuals who wish to speak in favor of the issues involving the vacation, please approach the lectern. Those who wish to speak in favor. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Doug Tunison. I'm the Construction and Facilities Manager for the school district. As you know, the construction has been completed, and we would like to clean up the ownership of that property with the vacation of these various bits of streets and alleys that, as you said, are now part of the school campus. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Any questions? Think you're good? Thank you so much. Any others who wish to speak in favor? At this time, I would ask those individuals who wish to speak in opposition to the issues involving the vacation to please approach the lectern. Those who wish to speak in opposition. There being no others to speak for or against the issues involving the vacation, I now declare the public hearing closed. Please read the ordinance by title only.
An ordinance approving the vacation of a portion of South Oak Street, South Elm Street, West 8th, 9th, and 10th Street, 2 alleys located in Block 84 Casper Edition, an alley located in Block 92 Casper Edition, and a portion of an alley located in Block 93 Casper Edition.
Chair to entertain a motion to approve on first reading the ordinance just read.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilman Hopkins, seconded by Councilman Johnson. Discussion. Any amendment? Sorry, Vice Mayor, go ahead.
Just a comment, Your Honor. Looking through those petitions, I'm not sure if it was our staff member or a state employee that went around to collect all of those signatures from all of those residents. I can only imagine how much work it was to find all of these people and get them all to sign these petitions. And whoever accomplished that, my hat is off to them.
They're pointing fingers over here at this guy. Were you?
Well done, sir.
Any other discussion? Any amendments? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passes.
I now declare the public hearing open for the consideration of the fiscal year 2019 budget amendments. Mr. City Attorney, do you have any exhibits?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. We have 2 exhibits. Exhibit number 1, correspondence from Tom Pitlick to J. Carter Napier, dated November 13, 2018. And exhibit number 2, affidavit of publication, is published in the Casper Star Tribune, dated November 20, 2018.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This is an effort that, for the most part, reconciles much of what we have experienced moving into fiscal year 19 and with regard to the actuals and the realities, if you will, of what's happening as we get into the fiscal year more thoroughly. Council has heard a lot of conversation leading up to this point as well, however, with regard to a number of major issues that this amendment accomplishes in addition to more of the routine reconciliations that amendments are typical to address. Some of those things include dealing with the insurance fund within the organization. There's been a lot of conversation with regard to some of the stopgap measures that the amendment accomplishes if approved. council is also aware that there are a number of personnel items that are accomplished, again, if the amendment is approved, most particularly with regard to the police department and with regard to the agreement that we have with the school district in carrying out a stronger presence on our campuses here locally. We also took quite a bit of effort this past several months to streamline a number of funds and clean up the accounting that takes place within the organization and hopefully make it a little more user-friendly, easier to follow, and from a customer service standpoint, more helpful and useful. We also deal with a number of projects that council has heard about over the last several months as well. This amendment is one that, while it's not as complex as the amendment a year ago that sought to balance the budget, it does do a lot that you probably won't see in typical amendments moving forward. In an answer to an earlier question, indeed, it is a very typical, common feature of an accounting process in a municipality to reconcile what it is that we tried to project from a budgetary standpoint to what it is we're experiencing from an actual standpoint. And in that regard, I would also say much of what we deal with from a budgeting standpoint is, and an approval standpoint from your position, is accounted for in the budgetary process. The amendment process, however, is another very important feature that tries to keep our contract with the community up to date and current.
Thank you. Council will now listen to public comment. Public hearing comments are limited to 5 minutes and no duplication will be allowed. At this time, I would ask those individuals who wish to speak in favor of the budget amendments to please approach the lectern. Those who wish to speak in favor. At this time, I would ask those individuals who wish to speak in opposition to the budget amendments to please approach the lectern. Those who wish to speak in opposition. There being no one to speak for or against the budget amendments, I now declare the public hearing closed. Chair to entertain a motion to, by resolution, authorize the fiscal year 2019 budget amendments.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilman Laird, seconded by Councilman Walsh. Discussion. Councilman Morgan.
Thank you, Mayor. Really quick question. When we originally drafted the fiscal year 18 budget, I was just curious to know, and I should have brought it up in pre-meeting, we moved the officers that for Metro to the police department. I'm just curious to know if we should reflect that in with this budget or what was proposed in pre-meeting in terms of full-time employees, or if that was already accounted for.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Morgan, you are correct. The FY19 budget does account for that movement. We do, however, need to do some additional corrections that would better account for where the cost centers ought to be more accurately reflected. And so while this particular amendment doesn't completely address those kinds of things, you will see those corrections come forward at a future date. Indeed, with regard to personnel kinds of things, as you alluded to, if we have those changes, that will be accounted for in that amendment as well.
Thanks.
Any other discussion? Amendments? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passes.
Council will now discuss the ordinance for the telecommunications franchise for the Quest Corporation doing business as CenturyLink QC. This item will be open for public comment and for discussion by the council. Please read the ordinance on third reading by title only.
An ordinance granting a franchise to Quest Corporation doing business as CenturyLink QC to operate and maintain a telecommunications system in the city of Casper, Wyoming.
Chair to entertain a motion to approve on third reading the ordinance just read.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilman Walsh, seconded by Councilman Morgan. Council will now listen to public comment. Public comments are limited to 5 minutes and no duplication of speakers. Any discussion? Amendments? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passes.
Council will now discuss the ordinance for the annexation, plat, replat, and zoning creating the State Office Building addition. This item will be open for public comment and for discussion by council. Please read the ordinance on second reading by title only.
An ordinance approving the annexation, plat, replat, and zoning creating the State Office Building addition and also approving the State Office Building addition subdivision agreement.
Chair to entertain a motion to approve on second reading the ordinance just read.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilman Hopkins, seconded by Councilman Johnson. Council will now listen to public comment. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes and no duplication. Discussion. Amendments? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passes.
Council will now discuss the ordinance for the panhandling ordinance. This item will be up for public comment and for discussion by council. Please read the ordinance on second reading by title only.
An ordinance repealing and replacing Chapter 9.18 of the Casper Municipal Code pertaining to panhandling.
Chair to entertain a motion to approve on second reading the ordinance just read.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilman Johnson, seconded by Councilman Walsh. Council will now listen to public comment. Discussion. Amendments? Councilman Laird.
I would like to amend the penalty provision in this ordinance. I don't know what's gotten into the council, but some of these penalties are just too harsh for what we're trying to do. And I don't know that it sends out the message you really think. I know the federal government's rolling back all their harsh penalties that they've been putting all these people in jail for these draconian sentences. And so it's what are we trying to accomplish by putting a $750 fine on a person who is asking for money because they have none? So I would like to amend the ordinance to have a penalty of $5 fine.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Oh, excuse me, sorry. Discussion. Sorry. I don't have it in my script. I'm doing it in my head, folks. Discussion. Councilman Walsh. I'll get you, Charlie.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're thinking, Dallas, and I always try and think of who's going to abuse it. So what about the person that's not homeless, that's not down on their luck, that's basically taking advantage of a situation and other people, and they very likely need a higher and stiffer sentence? So, I mean, I would like to see the judge have the flexibility to say, I just don't see him unnecessarily harming people that don't have the means. But if you're just a scam artist, I'd like to see him nail them.
Yes, Vice Mayor.
Well, this ordinance wouldn't give our police authority to even cite that person, as long as they were in the right area and they were being non-aggressive. And so that is the issue here, is that we've defined, we're not talking about citing people for begging for food. What we're doing is citing people if they've been aggressive about it, or if they've done it in a place where a person has a right to expect some privacy, such as an ATM. So I'm not going to vote for the amendment, because I think if people are aggressive and threatening, and if people, or they are invading people's privacy in an inappropriate location, that there should be some significant disincentives for that behavior. And if we fine them $5, well, they could just do that over and over again, and there would be no authority for our police department to take action to protect the public. So I think the ordinance is actually protecting people who want to ask for money, and we've discussed this before. It's just not going to protect people who do it inappropriately or threaten people.
Councilman Laird.
You know, I agree with both what you've said and what Councilman Walsh has said. So my whole theory was protecting people who were unable to pay the fine, and were doing it because they needed to do it. We did have an old ordinance, which you guys all changed at one point, about the penalties with respect to minors in possession, which was a 3-tier thing, where we used to have penalties on your first offense, you know, a first offense of $5, second offense of $50, a third offense of $750 or whatever you wanted, and then we set it and we sent out a tone, you know, if it is somebody. My thinking though is this is really a ordinance that deals with the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. I know Mr. Henley has worked very hard on it, and I know the manager asked him a question last time about this. Well, what would happen if we didn't pass this? Well, we would have the old ordinance. But what we've really done is we are tinkering with an unconstitutional ordinance to begin with. We're trying to take the dents out of it. And I think we put equally dents back in it. I don't think saying 20 feet from an ATM, you can have freedom of speech 20 feet away from that ATM. I think it's a nice carving by Mr. Henley, worked very hard on it. But it gets me back to some attorneys who in the past, they're always looking for ways around things. And there's not too many homeless people that can bring an action against the city of Casper. But the ACLU can do it. And I don't think this ordinance conquers the problem that either you or Mr. Walsh are thinking of, Charlie. I think that we have plenty of ordinances on file already. If somebody's harsh and creating a disturbance and scaring people, we have some pretty good laws for that. So to tie it in with one that incorporates a problem with freedom of speech, which is, could you give me $5, Councilman Powell? Come on, give me $5. I really need it. So under this ordinance, that's potentially illegal. And so I don't think you're going to see much of that. But I don't think any homeless people carry a tape measure to tape measure 20 feet 1 inch away from that ATM machine. It's freedom of speech that we're talking about here. I do feel sorry for people who are in poverty and people who are homeless. And I know we've dealt with this, with the guy with the $53,000 fine. I mean, some of these cities that are so nationally in trouble about the way they treat their people, we're doing that. We're doing what we're doing. And it's been, and if it ends up becoming an African-American person or someone else who adds a little supercharge to this problem, we're going to be in court. So what I'd really like to say is, I think that if you pass an unconstitutional ordinance that's determined unconstitutional, I think the councilman ought to pay the attorney's fees on the deal. And you'll be more careful. Because it's real easy to do things with other people's money. But in this case, I really don't see this but being any question other than a First Amendment situation. And I also think that my amendment was ill-conceived. And I don't know what to do about that, but I would like to amend it to being $5 for a first offense. Because then what you have is if they arrest some guy and it's his first offense and they find out he's homeless and all of this, it's easy to deal with that. If it's a scam artist, I agree with Councilman Walsh. If you're doing that and you're scaring people and you're creating havoc and you're stepping out in the street and you're yelling at people and intimidating people, I agree. That should be a pretty good fine. I think the bulk of these are the people that I see walking around over by the Nick. There was a guy kind of out in the street when we came back last night, and he had a sign and he was standing out in the street, and I wasn't driving, and it did bother the person in my car who was driving. They just felt uncomfortable because the guy was acting like he wanted her to roll the window down, and she was talking to me. I said, don't roll any windows down. The truth of it is, if I'd have been sitting in the seat, I probably would have rolled down the window because it's Thanksgiving and given him $5. But she was uncomfortable with it. So I agree, there's that kind of a problem, and the two that you two addressed should be addressed properly, but my $5 fine ought to be a first offense max, because then you can educate these people. Don't come down to the NIC, don't get over by the ATM machine. We'll draw a yellow line. If you stand right over here, 1 inch behind this yellow line, you can ask for the money. That's why I don't think that's going to fool anybody. If we eradicated the old ordinance and Mr. Henley came up with a new ordinance under a new name, it may not have the taint of panhandling and things that are already being declared unconstitutional, but some of these little ways around this, it's not going to fool any 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. And I'd like the council to pass good laws that are fair in their administration, and something Mr. Huber said, yes, sometimes the courts have to step in, but we have the tool to tell the court how heavy they can step on the person. I'm really not in favor of giving huge anvils, bats to some of the courts so they can bash people. I think we ought to have the control over that, and we do. And so if a state statute comes in and says, here's what we do, and it's uniform across this state, that's one thing. But if you have a panhandling ordinance in Laramie that nobody enforces, and all of a sudden, and I don't really, truly, I don't see an influx of these arrests. I don't think Chief McFeeters is going to go out and arrest everybody over by the NIC. But if we get a number of them, we could have a problem. So I don't know what to do about my amendment, Mr. Mayor, because I agree with what the two councilmen have said.
So, Councilman Hockman, did you have a comment that you wanted to make? On the amendment, okay. So first, let me just say this. If he's withdrawing his amendment, how do we go back to that if he wants to create his amendment to be more about $5 per, for the first offense?
It's an amendment to the amendment, so that's a second issue.
So do I have to do?
Not an objection unless there's unanimity. You've got to continue this through. So I'd go ahead and finish this out, and then he can make another amendment, of course.
Okay, so finish out the first amendment to see where, so do you have a comment about this amendment? Okay, go ahead. Yep.
I'll just read what it says, and this is right out of 918-070. Any person convicted of violating this chapter may be fined not more than $750, jailed for not longer than 6 months or both. That means that if a judge saw fit to fine somebody 25 cents, that meets the requirement within this thing. I would trust our judges with enough judicial prudence to just administer this reasonably. That's why we pay judges to do it.
Go ahead.
I did too.
My comment is this: not only do I trust the judges to judge properly the correct penalties, I also trust our police department, and we have hired a police chief who has established a reputation as being community-oriented, as not using the department to fund city operations, but instead to educate the public about proper behavior. And I have every confidence that if someone did step over the line with respect to this ordinance, the first step would be education. And that I would hope and expect that the officer would take the individual aside and say, look, you just can't do this. And we need you to tone it down, or you have to be over here instead, and then you're fine. It's legal for you to ask for money. You just have to do it this way in this place. And I have every confidence that our police department would do that, rather than look for every opportunity to cite someone and lead to a fine. And I would hope that that would diffuse the vast majority of these situations were they to occur. And so, I just don't think it's necessary for us to tweak the ordinance. Let's give people the discretion to implement it properly.
Councilman Morgan.
Thank you, Mayor. Speaking against the First Amendment, I just wanted to kind of agree with Councilman Walsh and Councilman Powell. But at the same time, I'm kind of hesitant in going with that mindset, because there are people that are not going to read this ordinance. They're already under hardship in many cases. So for them to know that they can't panhandle around David Street Station and then be slapped with a fine might be a little too much. So I like the idea of a first offense and second offense for the people that are aggressively panhandling. And I am also concerned, that's a valid point. Do we automatically give up the First Amendment just because you're within 20 feet of an ATM machine or a sidewalk cafe or David Street Station or along Beverly Street and other areas? And I understand that there's a safety concern, so I was just going to ask if you find it appropriate to call on our city attorney. I know he did reflect that case by the Supreme Court and kind of modeled this ordinance given some of those challenges. So I'm just curious to hear that opinion.
Mr. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Looked at different ordinances, read the cases, used a lot of the municipal lawyer models panhandling ordinance to draft this. This is incorporated a lot. I found that this organization is really very bright, so I didn't really hesitate to incorporate those provisions which I thought would fit our community. And so in that regard, we're talking about free speech, but you're giving people a lot of room to speak all over the city, except for maybe 1%, less than 0.5%. I don't know what it actually works out to be. So we're preserving their right to have free speech, and in fact, we're saying you definitely do have a right to have free speech. We're just saying that there are some circumstances here where other people have rights too. You have the right to freedom of movement, the right not to be hassled about this and to be scared, the right of disabled people who are at the Catsy bus stop not to be taken advantage of, the right to go into a dark parking garage at night if you're a small individual, a big individual, a female, a male, but you don't want to be scared in there, be assaulted, or have, be concerned and maybe trip and fall and hurt yourself that way. So again, it's a balancing act, and if we didn't balance it right, fine, no problem with that. But it just seems to me that these people that we borrowed from, to a large degree, pretty smart folks, and so I was pretty comfortable using their intelligence.
Thank you.
Councilman Laird.
Mr. Henley, one of the things that bothers me too about these penalties that are being implemented, because they're being consistent, and Mr. Huber was once a judge, and that's the kind of penalties that he was given authority to administer. But I think if you reflect back, Mr. Huber, when you were a judge, if you have a penalty that provides for a jail term, the person is conceivably entitled to an attorney. And you can probably see very clearly that the people this is directed at can't afford an attorney. And then I don't know what it costs us to put people in jail. So if they have no fine, then what's the jail sentence going to be up there? A day or 2 or 3? So now it costs the city $300 or whatever it is. And then if you have to have the attorney hired because you have the jail sentence on it, not intending that you'd ever give them the jail sentence, but if it calls for it, we still have to provide the attorney. I think that's true, isn't it, Mr. Huber?
I believe that you're right, yeah.
So what we've created with what's really is a municipal court that was designed primarily for traffic offenses. We're creating something beyond that with these sentencing problems. And now this court can get very expensive to run, and there isn't going to be any way one judge can do it. If all of a sudden now people are saying, I want a jury trial, and getting advised properly of their rights with respect to that, I'd like to avoid that problem. I'd like to have a nice streamlined court that doesn't need to put people in jail. If we need to put people in jail, the city police do it all the time. They file the case over in Mr. Huber's old court. They're set up for probation. They're set up for jail. They're set up for counselors. We're not set up for that. Now, this is going to be an expensive proposition for you in a few days if this gets passed, if these type of sentences keep coming down the pike. Because now every kid who gets arrested for minor in possession, for having a sip of beer at the Christmas party when he's 17, he can demand a jury because you now have it as a 6 months jail sentence and a $750 fine. And I think the lawyers in this town, when they get a sniff of that and what's going on, that's what they're going to start demanding. And if everybody comes in there to teach this city a lesson, let's just have everybody get a jury trial. We'll go over there and we'll have jury trials. And I guarantee you, Mr. Manager, you're not going to like to pay those bills. And why? We don't need to have jury trials for some of these offenses. If Chief McFeeder's men thinks it's a serious enough issue, that some guy's choking somebody, demanding money and all of this, charge him with something else over in county court and deal with him on that basis. But I think you're asking for problems. This is a council-appointed judge. Council appointed everybody. Nobody's elected. We're not under the same rules as the court systems of the state of Wyoming. It's an antiquated court system, but it needs to be changed by the legislature. And I think they've had bills to try to change it. But we keep losing. The fact is, it's a municipal court that handles traffic offenses, and it got bumped up to DUIs. When I was the prosecutor over here, if it was a serious DUI, we charged it over in county court because then they could put him in jail and all of that kind of thing. Because in those days you couldn't do that here, and you can do it now, but it still requires getting a lawyer involved and getting expenses and jail and all of that. So you're building a situation I don't think any of you are going to be happy with money-wise.
Councilman Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Laird's brought up a lot of different points here that I'd love to chase down every one of those rabbit holes, but for once I'm not going to do that. But there are three things that I'd like to bring up here. First, I appreciate what he's talking about, that the futility and the unfairness of taking people that are indigent and have nothing and saying, well, you're going to pay a fine. Well, it's already the black letter law of the land from the United States Supreme Court and from the Wyoming Supreme Court that you cannot punish people differently simply because they don't have money. And so you can't sit there and say, well, you have no money, therefore we're going to put you in jail, or I'm going to impose this huge, great big fine on you. Oh, you don't have any money, now I'm going to find you in contempt for not paying that fine and put you in jail. That's already taken care of in case law. The other thing is that I'd like to comment on, and I appreciate that this amendment that's currently on the floor only doesn't talk about setting up a tiered thing, first offense, second offense, and that stuff. I never cared for those things that say, well, first offense, oh, we're just going to let that be a minor little thing, because there is such a thing as an offender who, yeah, it's their first offense, but they go out and by God, they do it up in spades. Oh, well, that's only a $5 fine. Worth it to me to do that. And I think that we need to give the court the flexibility to recognize that there is such a thing as a benign first offense, but there's also such a thing as a very aggravated first offense. And so for all those reasons, I'd oppose Councilman Laird's amendment, and I would oppose setting up a tiered kind of a system.
Okay, so the amendment on the floor right now currently is the amendment for $5 instead of the $750. Am I correct in that, Mr. Henley?
I believe that's correct.
Okay, thank you. So please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
With Councilmember Laird voting aye, motion fails. Motion to amend.
Thank you. Now, Councilman Laird, you had said that you had wanted to have the other amendment where $5 for the first offense, correct?
I'm not going to make any more amendments.
No more.
I would if I was going to be on here for 2 more years.
Okay.
Because then I could really be a thorn in Michael Huber's side. I'm not gonna do it.
All right, sounds good.
I'd like to offer an amendment.
Yes, go ahead.
I'd like to amend the penalty section of this ordinance to reflect $5 for the first offense, And then for a second offense for a cited individual, that would be up to the $750 and also up to 6 months in jail.
Second.
Discussion. Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
Council members Morgan and Laird voting aye. Motion to amend fails.
Any other amendments? Okay, so now please cast your vote on the second reading of the ordinance of the panhandling ordinance. Please record the vote.
Council members Morgan and Laird voting nay. Motion passes.
Thank you. Council will now discuss the ordinance for the motor vehicle operators licensing ordinance. License ordinance. This item will be up for public comment and discussion by the council. Please read the ordinance on second reading by title only.
An ordinance repealing and replacing Section 10.12.010 of the Casper Municipal Code pertaining to possession of motor vehicle operators license required.
Chair to entertain a motion to approve on second reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Walsh, seconded by Councilman Hopkins. Council will now listen to public comment. Discussion? Any amendments? Please cast your vote. Councilman Hopkins. Thank you. Please record the vote.
With all members voting aye, motion passes.
Council will now discuss the resolution for the police department shooting range project. Because this is not on the consent agenda, it will be open for discussion by council. Please read the resolution by title only.
The resolution authorizing an agreement with Installation and Service Company, Inc. for the Police Department Shooting Range Improvements Project.
Chair to entertain a motion to approve the resolution just read.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilman Laird, seconded by Councilman Johnson. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Council authorized via budget process the expansion of the police department shooting range, which in this particular instance would include the addition of a building to accommodate a lot of the classroom instruction and that type of training need. A bid was let and 5 responses were received. The lowest apparent bidder was Installation and Service Company out of Mills, Wyoming, for a base bid amount of $169,971.66.
Thank you. Discussion. Councilman Morgan.
Thank you, Mayor. I had pulled this off for discussion and basically just to get more information. There was a project that was in the close proximity to this shooting range, and they had hit a water table, and there are some other improvements that they had to do. So I was just curious to know if engineering had accounted for that, and to my surprise, they accounted for that and more. They also, I guess, did some boring to help mitigate some of that issue, and of course, put it into this bid. So I appreciate staff and, of course, the city manager for giving me an answer for that, and I just wanted to say it during a public meeting to ensure that, you know, we're keeping an eye out. We're trying to keep any change orders to a minimum, and I understand people's frustration. We even had public comment earlier today about change orders, so here's an instance where we're being proactive in that.
Any other discussion? Amendments? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passes.
Please read the consent resolutions by title only.
Item 12B1, a resolution authorizing the release of the city's lien on the tractor, truck, and trailer for the Food Bank of the Rockies. Item 12B2A, a resolution accepting a grant from the Wyoming Office of Homeland Security. Item 12B3, a resolution authorizing a procurement agreement with Andritz Separation, Inc. for 3 air conditioning units for use at the Sam H. Hobbs wastewater treatment plant. Item 12B4, a resolution authorizing an agreement with Davidson Mechanical, Inc. for the Casper Event Center combination oven steamer replacements project. Item 12B5, a resolution authorizing change order number 1 to the agreement with Trito Construction, LLC for final quantity variations for the 2018 Beverly Street Improvements Project. Item 12B6, a resolution authorizing an agreement with Modern Electric Company for the Regional Wastewater System Lift Station Generator River West Project. And item 12B7, a resolution authorizing an agreement with Casper Building Systems, Inc. for compost equipment building heating project.
Thank you. Chair would entertain a motion to adopt the consent resolutions just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Walsh, seconded by Vice Mayor Powell. Any abstentions or nay votes?
Mayor, I'm
Yes.
going to vote no on the change order, which is to Trito.
On Trito, okay. 12B5.
I'm going to vote no on that, and I'll vote yes for the rest, so how do I do that? Just tell her.
Just say it, yep. Yep. Any other abstentions or nay votes? Okay, please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
With Councilmember Laird voting nay on item 12B5, motion passed.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent minute action agenda items just read. Pardon me, please read the consent minute action.
Item 13A1, approve a 10-year extension for bar and grill liquor license number 10, Marvin Peel Family LLC, doing business as The Tower, located at 100 North Center Street. Item 13A2, authorizing the discharge of uncollectible accounts receivable balances aged between the dates of July 1st through September 30th, 2013, including a more recent bankruptcy. Item A3, authorizing the purchase of one new trailer-mounted air compressor from United Rentals, Inc. for use by the Solid Waste Division of the Public Services Department. Item 13A4, authorizing the purchase of one new one-ton crew cab pickup truck with 8-foot bed and accessories from Fremont Motors for use by the Solid Waste Division of the Public Services Department. Item 13A5, authorizing the purchase of 3 new half-ton regular cab pickup trucks from Fremont Motors for use by the Building Inspection Section of the Community Development Department. Item 13A6, authorizing the purchase of 1 hydraulic material handler from Power Equipment Company for use by the Solid Waste Division of the Public Services Department. Item 13A7, authorizing the purchase of 2 new flatbed haul trailers from CMI Tico for use by the Solid Waste Division of the Public Services Department, and rejecting all bids received for the wastewater treatment plant dewatering building heater replacement project.
Thank you. Chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent minute action agenda items just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Hopkins, seconded by Councilman Walsh. Any abstentions or nay votes? Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
That's okay. With all members voting aye, motion passes.
At this time, we ask council members to bring forward relevant concerns or any items of interest. Councilman Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll touch on one thing that Mr. Steensland brought up about the trade-in on the vehicles. When I used to have to put together things to purchase the vehicle, the problem with putting the trade-in in is you don't always know that you're going to have the vehicle to trade in when it comes time to purchase it. So it's better to ask for full price and then not have to come back before the council and make an explanation on why it basically appears like you underbid it. So I know in our case, that's the reason that we would not allow, or we wouldn't put the trade-in in. And aside from that, I hope everybody has a happy Thanksgiving.
Councilman Huber.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Awesome. Councilman Hopkins.
Hope you don't eat too much, but in any case, on November 26th at 5:30 here in City Hall, in the lobby, we're going to have Phase 1 discussions regarding the David Street to Elm construction project, which has been in the works for a long time, and it's really a big piece of getting it all together for our state office building. So there'll be people out in the front hall explaining what's going to happen and take some public input.
Councilman Johnson.
Nothing.
Councilman Morgan.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of things from the public comment. The AC units, I'm not sure if Mr. Steensland is aware of the packet and what the wastewater treatment has to deal with, but the hydrogen sulfide that is out there is highly corrosive, and of course it requires something a little more in depth than what Arrowhead could provide or any other service provider. So they're very specific to their purpose, and it is needed. Next, in terms of bullying and things like that, obviously this council is against it, and I'm happy after we passed the resolution. I believe our chief of police did go to a school to talk about bullying, so that's a great proactive measure that our law enforcement are taking upon themselves to raise awareness to the issue and then hopefully limit it to a minimal use and maybe one day eliminate it altogether. I know our police department has taken training for, cognitive based with victim services and things like that when they're interviewing somebody to make sure that they're not re-victimizing the victim, of course, and just being aware of that and speaking to them on a different term as opposed to just, a different traffic stop or something like that. So I guess I would be interested to know if our school resources officers receive such a training. And, I think just for my own knowledge, I'd like to know what training they do receive specifically in dealing with children and of course, teachers in that environment. Outside of that, it's really tough with change orders. I know a lot of people see those and raise questions, but there are unforeseen events that occur, whether it's cobblestone underneath a highway that you're trying to bore through or anything else. So I don't think that there's anything shady with the change orders that we approve. I do support them, and if I didn't, I would obviously vote no, but they are needed at times.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councilman Laird.
Mr. Manager, I'm hoping we can give the city employees a one-time payment before the end of the year. That's my hope. I know you're looking into that. We have great city employees, every one of them. I have great confidence in them. I know our police department is in very good hands, and I see the police department growing and changing. I'm hoping they'll get their building sooner than 6 years. I think you're a very good manager. I'm glad you're here. I really would like to see the council address and pass a bullying ordinance. It has a little teeth in it, $750 fine, 6 months in jail. Give authority to the court.
To the county court or the city court?
Get everybody straightened out down there. But I think that the issue too with bullying is that there's a victim and a victim too. I understand that because some of these bullies, that's the way they were raised. And I don't know how we solve that social problem, but I think we're doing that. I think our officers that work the schools, they've got 2 officers working for 13,000 children, so they're a little thin, and sometimes things that get said get misinterpreted and all of that. But I know those officers, they're good men, and I don't think they would do anything to hurt your daughter. I really don't. I think they would do everything within their power to protect your daughter. I have a great deal of confidence in the police, but when there's 13,000 students they're looking after, and then the issue with bullying is it's very seldom witnessed. And in your case, you have a video, partial video that you could see, but there's other parts that happened apparently that there was no video. So it's kind of like our panhandling ordinance. There's no question in my mind that an officer sees that, he can go handle it perfectly. It's the ones that he doesn't see, where somebody might overstate the case, might lie about the case, might give him false information, and that's where it becomes problematic in its enforcement. So I know that most of you who are not lawyers don't see the inside of a courtroom and how these things are proved, but it isn't easy, especially when it's easy when the officer sees it or has a videotape. And that can change everything. Now we have body cams, and so I don't know whether are they all carrying body cams yet, Chief? When will that happen?
We're finalizing the contracts.
When do you think it'll happen?
We're working furiously to begin installation in December.
That's going to be fantastic. We have a good city, and it's heading in the right direction. And I've been humbled to be on this council. And I appreciate you all giving me the opportunity to be on the council. Thank you very much, and happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Your Honor. I also want to commend you folks for coming down. It takes a lot of courage. And I do hope that the school districts, I know they went to great lengths to develop a policy that really has not been in place very long, and I'm hopeful that it will address some of these problems that have come up, because I know, to echo our mayor's comments, that all of these people want the best for our kids, and there are no villains amongst the people who try to sort these things out. Part of what you're dealing with, though, is, and I'm sure Mr. Silva will have this experience, is when you start to interview people about an event, you would swear they're at two very different events that bear nothing, that have nothing in common, and they both hold very closely to their memories, and they believe what they're saying. And so it's difficult, and I have great empathy for the people who try to sort these things out. Clearly, we have an atmospheric problem that we need to keep working on, and so your coming forward tonight continues to press us to do a better job with that. So, and I'd just like to comment on one other thing. I see that Mr. Peel's project is on our consent action agenda here that we passed, and I think we had some discussion about possibly looking at our zoning in a historic district area where some of the zoning requirements, such as the one that has been a real stumbling block for Mr. Peel, the fire escape, might be grandfathered in some way, so that someone could move forward with a project and not essentially have to abandon it or go for extensions. And I hope that that's going to end up on our grid at some point, so that we can talk about whether that would be, if there's some way for us to address that, so that we can continue to make improvements in our city's core without people being held up by zoning requirements. So with that, I'll echo happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thank you. I just want to finally make my closing remarks tonight brief, but to again address that obviously we know that bullying is an epidemic that we face. As a former educator and a youth worker, that I still continue to work with youth now, it's there, and we can enact in all the laws, we can create all the ordinances, we can do all the trainings, but until we figure out and understand, and I don't know when that happens or when it looks like that someday in a perfect society, when we see all people as humans, and we seek that compassion and humanity from the very top, from our very top leaders who put things on social media that can be hurtful or be devastating, and how we have our top people making comments that are hurtful to other people, and examples to our young people, we find that our society has a lot to learn. So it is hopeful that we learn to look at those things and we grow from that. And that's what I usually teach young people when I talk to them about showing respect to everybody. It's a process. And so my heart is with you guys to know that I understand that what you're facing. And hopefully this community will see one another as people and respect that with compassion. So thank you. And I would like to just finally end on behalf of the City Council, on behalf of the city and the staff of City of Casper, to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. And we have a lot to be thankful for. And so hopefully we can reflect on that. So have a wonderful Thanksgiving. God bless.
Motion to adjourn.
Got to make one announcement. Next meetings of the City Council will be a work session to be held at 4:30 p.m. Tuesday, November 25th, 2018 in the Council Meeting Room, and a regular Council meeting to be held at 6 p.m. Tuesday, December 4th, 2018 in the Council Chambers. Chair to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, and incidentally, we have 41 days left.
Oh, jeez. Moved by Councilman Laird, seconded by Councilman Johnson. Please cast your vote. Please record the vote.
All members voting aye, motion passes.
Meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoy your trip, Carter.